And next up we have the Saturday evening game, prime time, and it is something of an El Clasico in the Six Nations as far as the tradition, the history, the fans. It feels like the biggest game for both nations. Always a classic, always a tight one, always a serious rivalry. It is, of course, England versus Wales. This is a juicy one on Saturday afternoon with the stakes so high as well. It's going to kick off. It's going to be Twickenham, London, 4:45 or 4:45 GMT. And the refereeing team, Mike Adamson has the whistle, and it's a big job for him. Hopefully we're not talking about him come next week's show. And we've got Ray Naum and Frank Murphy as AORs, and Brian McNeese in the TMO box. Obviously this is one of the games. This is a true Six Nations classic now. Giants of the tournament.
As much as it can end up being one for the purists, because they do end up in dogged arm wrestles all the time. The atmosphere is always electric, be it in the Millennium Stadium or in Twickenham as we have it this time around. It's always electric. You're right to say it. It does feel like the biggest one for both of these nations when it does roll around. Just the extra spice to match week, and there's some nice honest hatred there. That's good. It feels good rugby matches. It makes for intense tackles and great stuff, which is what we're in it for anyway. They've played each other for time immemorial as far as rugby's concerned, but all the way back to 1881. A total of 137 matches have been played between the two. England have won 65, Wales 60, and 12 matches have been drawn as well. So it's as tight as head-to-heads get, really.
When you consider the history, like they've each had their purple patch, patches in various decades. But overall, it's evened out pretty much. Wire to wire.
Pretty much wire to wire, with England just on the slight edge. Other stats as well, that Wales's last win in Twickenham, you have to go all the way back to the 2015 World Cup, where they famously won in that Pool A game that saw England knocked out of their home World Cup, which was obviously a tremendous day for Welsh rugby, but they haven't really replicated it since. Twickenham has been a tricky place for them to go since.
That's never a win there under the tenure of Eddie Jones, of course. Obviously haven't come in. They have had some success at home, but winning in Twickenham is a different matter. They won in Twickenham in 2008 and 2012 as part of their Grand Slams. It has been done. They had a 1-point win in 1999. However, you do have to go back for a fourth win. You have to go back all the way to 1988. So the Twickenham factor, it's not quite Eden Park, but it's very, very real. You have I think they said in this competition an 85% winning record there. Now, they've only the 2 games there this year as well, so they'll be determined to make that factor count. And obviously, a big job for the Welsh. As far as the stakes and the tournament stakes for this game, 1-1, both of them on the fence, both of them needing to win. The loser of this game, you're talking about them as potential 5th place, and then the winner of this game are potential winners. Both sides, like even Italy, or even Wales was saying, have Italy still to play.
They do.
On the last day, so they're thinking, gee whiz, we get a win here. We go back to the Millennium. All of a sudden, that Welsh momentum is building again. We go back to the Millennium Stadium with all our fans behind us and have a gladiatorial match against France. Which, if we win, we have a great chance of, at the very least, taking the lead on the table at the beginning of Saturday. Win over Italy.
They don't have the advantage on the last day of knowing what they have to do in the Italy match, but they know they'll have to rack up a score of some kind, and it does always make for some excitement. But it's do or die for both sides. It's a win, and your campaign carries on. A loss and you're kind of bust then with a losing record through the middle hurdle. It's just two defeats and you're not winning the competition. So as far as it's not there's not the case that like Pivac or Eddie Jones are under pressure from this game, but it is the case that if they win it, this competition is gone for them. No, indeed, it's do or die for both in that regard. But you're right in saying it's not the end of the world. It's we were billing the whole time. It's going to be a massively difficult tournament to win, and there'll be many sides that do themselves credit despite not managing to get to the title as well. But that'll not be on the minds of either of these teams as they go in. Bragging rights up for grabs. And we're going to start by looking at we're going to preview both sides, but we're going to start with the hosts, which is England, and just look at their winning conditions for this one and what they'll be looking to achieve, and just how they want to get after the Welsh at home and look to avenge certain demons from last year where it was a bit more one-sided.
Yeah, as far as the English squad is concerned, we do have some news. Eddie Jones has cut his squad to 25, so we have more or less the bones of the team of the match day 23, even if we don't quite know the order, as it is Wednesday as we're shooting this. It was bad news for many players. 4 forwards, Alfie Barbieri, who for me was one of the form loose forwards in Europe coming into this tournament, and unfortunately is doomed to see no minutes. He's gone. Jamie Blamir's gone. Joe Hayes is gone. Joe Launchbury's gone. Orlando Bailey, George Furbank, Louis Lina, Rafi Quirk, Adam Radwan, and Joe Marchant, who started the first 2 games and had a rough couple of games, and I was really encouraged to see him come in and take that Tuolangi mantle, but obviously getting stood up by Darcy Graham and then getting stood up a couple of times last week, and it's just not gone the way I would have thought, because he's a great player.
He was playing brilliant stuff last year. This time last year, really, he was near infallible in some of those performances, but form is a tricky thing, and he's dropped out. But there was other squad news. The big stuff that was circulating all week was the Tuolagi rumour mill, because as you were saying, you wanted Marchand in the midfield to try and fill that Tuolagi shaped hole, but they seem to have kept a Tuolagi to fill that hole. And,
we know that he's going to likely be in the 23 based on the squad that we have, but he might not start. They might go with Elliot Daly at 13, but for the love of God, why would they do that? They're not going to do, surely not. Eddie Jones, he's come up with some mad ones in the past, but I suspect Tuolagi will be in just for the balance of the team with Slade and Smith, and then you're looking at Malins, Noel and Freddie Stewart back 3. And as far as the pack is concerned, there are some options here again. Jamie George versus Cowan Dickey, that age-old debate. Personally, you start Jamie George, you let him play 60 minutes and do all of his magical things. Cowan Dickey comes on, gets a couple of jackal steals, Bob's your uncle. That's your way of going about it. And then they've also got Courtney Laws back in the mix, which creates an interesting dynamic, because they've been usually putting him at 6 and putting Itoji in the second row, but Itoji went so well at 6 last week. I know it was Italy, but he just looked freer in that role.
And it does afford you the chance to just get more big locks. Well, like Courtney Laws has played lock as well. There's like an element to which if you can want both of them on the pitch, you can chop or change the jerseys or the roles in the scrum. But I agree that Itoji did look a little bit more able to do the free roaming kind of stuff than the damage he was doing in the open field, be it at breakdowns and in tackles, was really good in his role as a 6. So remains to be seen, but what we do know is that the pack, whatever way you make it up, is very dynamic and very young.
And you're expecting Tom Brandt in there, and Curry's in really fine form, and then guys like Nick Ezekwe coming through, who's really good,
really powerful athletes, and a younger just dynamic from them. They've kind of shifted a few of the more older heads out, and they have a pretty settled in terms of the spine of it. Like you're saying, that George or Luke Cowan-Dickey, wouldn't worry about either of them starting. There are quite a few experienced heads there, but just overall they're powerful athletes and pretty dynamic too, and they're looking to play a bit more ball. So we're excited to see this new England team take on a very wily and tricky opponent in Wales.
That's it. I mean, like when you look at the dynamics, there's a lot of predictions going on. I mean, the first thing that you'd say about Wales, I think, if you were to summarise them in a word, perhaps, well, there's probably many words, but last year it would have been clinical, but this year it's kind of back to being crafty.
Yes,
like that's what it feels like. They're like, that's what dug them out the win against Scotland last week. They're crafty,
and it's caught England out before.
It has, and I was going to just highlight this because Charlie Morgan, who's a journalist with Telegraph, had a great piece, and I would give him credit for this, because it's a dynamic you've been aware of, but you just outlined it in such stark overtones. Is basically that Wales have employed now for the last 5 years a pretty consistent strategy tailored to England, where they just do not kick for touch.
No.
Full stop. So he's had some stats to highlight this, basically saying England have had 17 lineouts in each of the first 2 Six Nations games.
Yeah. And
they've had a total of 15 in the last 3 Six Nations games against Wales.
Yeah.
So less than those 3 than they've had in each of their opening 2. He went through those 5 games. He counted 104 Welsh kicks in open play, and said 3 were intentionally hit into touch.
There you go.
And across, I think he was saying across Eddie Jones's 71 tests, the 3 lowest line-out game totals come from the last 3 Six Nations games against Wales.
Yeah.
And he was saying also that like inside staff in Wales were amazed that New Zealand allowed England 20 line-outs in the semi-final, in that famous semi-final that they lost. And this is something we know, is that because this is where England have been their comfort zone.
Eddie Jones teams in general, like even his Japan team loved launching off a line out. They had many a pretty strike move to launch from around the 10 metre line with a line out, and it's dangerous to give them that. They were dialing in their restart game to try and pin you back such that you would kick it out. And then all they wanted was a
line out in midfield. It is their absolute comfort zone, and so it has been in this week as well. Their best tries and their best sequences against Italy came off line out. So it is again with this team, and this is where England have to evolve. They have to,
because like you got to know going in from an England point of view that Wales are the team that will not kick to touch against you. They just will not, and it's Biggar and Williams out there probably, and you're just going to have to deal with the aerial battle that they're going to try and impose on you, and it'll become a ding-dong battle in the middle third. But this is where you need to get good at kind of transition and launching off that kick return. You need to not really make it about, like, as much as there's a lot of excitement about your new young 10 who is fantastic, Marcus Smith, and your new young 15, Freddie Stewart, who has been fantastic and passed pretty much every significant test he's come up against, including the Springboks, which was mighty. But you still don't want to make the game about the aerial duel in the middle third when you have Biggar and Liam Williams opposite you, and it's up in the air literally as to whether you win that game. It's a bounce of a ball, whereas if you can find a way, they're not going to give you line-outs, but find a way to launch off that transition kick return. You like be ready to strike. It is difficult, inherently more difficult to do, but not impossible, and they do have good runners to do that.
If you look at now, Ireland are a very specific team in one way, and Wales are probably more difficult to break down on this exact instance. But like, if you look at what France did in the opening power play against Ireland, now it did technically go into touch, but they threw it in quickly as per a kick return. But I think that's kind of your template example, is if they're kicking it down one touchline as quick as is humanly possible, preferably with no rucks in between, but if not, you sit after one ruck, go right to the opposite touchline as quick as you can, spread your players. And this is something like their shape, their natural pod shape this year is slightly different, where you have pods of 3 forwards on the wing a lot of the time, with, like, you've seen like Genge and Jamie George and Dombrandt and Simmons, and loads of guys have been hanging out
really
there.
Really good strike runners.
Exactly right. And then you combine them with your Knowles and your wingers like that. Like, if they can fold into their shape off kicks quickly and move the ball out to one edge, then you're going to attract all those Welsh defenders, your likes of whoever they're playing at 13, your Jonathan Davis potentially, or Nick Tompkins, or Watkin coming over on one side, get him tied up, and then move it across to the other side. And there's a good chance that defences will overfold onto the open side as you move it there in a panic. And if you can trust your 10, which I think you can, to sit deep and pick the right pass and get a nice wide pass going to some planned strike runners over there, then I think you're going to have a good chance to launch a sequence and get your rumbling class offense going.
And then transition into your multi-phase attack that may have been originally planned to be off a line out, but may present itself in the open play if you can kind of generate that from transition and punish Wales's kicking infield with counterplay, like really dangerous counterplay, to make them think twice about it, because setting that tone will be important. The aerial battle is always important in this one. It very often comes down to it, but so too the set piece, and that is one area where England will fancy an edge, because when there's kicking in the middle third, when it's a bit probing, as it often is at periods, a mistake can be vital, because a drop can lead to a scrum, and whoever's edging the scrum can then edge the territory and can work the penalty board in their favour. And England love getting on top of teams, and there are always periods in these Wales games when their pack do kind of gain supremacy and gain the upper hand for a sequence, and it's going to be about making them count on the scoreboard by the end, because Wales are primed to be out of a contest, but if you keep it a one score game, they can just snatch it away very quickly.
That's right, yeah. And I think if they dominated the scrum, it would be a bonus. Like, I do rate the Welsh scrum, and what Thomas Francis has been doing at tight head. I think his form is really, really great.
True. So I also haven't quite seen, like, as much as England do have very good props and a very good like pack on nuts and bolts, I haven't quite seen this new kind of combination at scrum time really work just yet. It'd be nice to see it gel properly, but it feels like it's still kind of bedding in as a set piece for them. They do prefer lineouts, which is obviously where that kicking stat comes from.
Indeed, yeah. And like on that offensive end, like first of all, Tuolangi's presence is going to change everything as well. It really will facilitate them getting the men wide, because you'll have him in the midfield sitting down defenders. Like, that's the great thing, is Wales, they're defending at the moment with 2 13s, one on either edge. The centres aren't defending together at all, so you got Tompkins on one side and Watkin on the other last week, or if Jay Davis comes into the team, then you're going if you have both of them defending the edge, your middle's going to be soft. And if England are trying to go from one side to the other, which they've been a really wide attack in the opening couple of weeks,
in the as they always are in the absence of Tuilagi, they change kind of on a dime depending on whether he's there or not.
And yet they've actively not replaced him. They've put forwards on the wings, but now he's back in there, and there's going to be space for him. He's going to create that space. And I think Wales have kind of hodgepodged and put Thomas Williams in the 12 channel sometimes, and like there's definitely scope for Tuilagi to bang up. But the other thing is, like, you're obviously not going to get your offense rumbling 5 or 6 times in a game. It'll probably only be 3 or 4. And on the other occasions where they have the ball, like you're talking about them loving the line out, Wales are going to deprive them of the line out, but they shouldn't fear being the team to kick for touch. You obviously want to kick on your own terms, but if Wales are going to play that aerial game, you're going to have to deal with that, and it's a huge day for Freddie Stewart, and you'll have to deal with that. But then if you can be the team that probes it back into the corners and just forces Wales with their hooker Elias, who's been known to have some issues sometimes, to have 3 or 4 or 5 lineouts in their own 22.
Fledgling line out of their own, to be honest, as well. Like that's partly why they don't want to take on England at all, or many people at line out, is that like Alan Wynn's down, it's a chop and change. There's a lot of responsibility on Adam Beard in that, so that's another factor as well, is that at line out and everywhere else, a guy like Itoje set him on Adam Beard watch and try and slowly chip away and destroy him. But with a stolen line out here or a big tackle there, and then one by one those little moments will just add up to
I couldn't agree more.
Big gains.
Adam Beard is the soul of this pack still. He's the heart and soul of it. He's trying to take on that Alan Wynne-Jones role, and he did a really good job last week. But yeah, absolutely, I would imagine Itoje will be man marking him everywhere. Like any chance to get a hit in or a clean out or something.
All the lineouts as scrappy as he can be, and stay clean. Obviously, discipline always a caveat to any of that bullish stuff that English packs love to do. England packs do want to be bullies and be proactive, and you do need to do that. But obviously, mind the P's and Q's. It can't be throwing him across the line too eagerly, because Wales will slow down and capitalise on those mistakes. So stay clean, but apply the squeeze to specific players like Beard.
Stay clean is such a good one. And also just play with dynamism. Like sometimes when England are at their worst, they're just a little, and it's true of a lot of teams, but they can be just a little wishy-washy in their body language.
Sometimes a bit pedestrian, particularly with ball in hand, more so than on the defence.
And you noticed it in different plays against Italy. Like there were plays when Smith had the ball and he was kind of goose-stepping and there was no one running off him, and then there were good sequences when everything felt exaggerated, like when players were running from really, really deep. So he had like an options sprinting on the ball, and he had Slade. Like if he's passing to his left, he had Slade as the pivot behind his right shoulder as the play starts and sweeping onto the ball. And so you have those kind of exaggerated offensive sequences with someone like Dombrandt in another pivot position as well. But when they're all sprinting and they're all trusting their skills to sort of run flat and pass one way or another, I think Jamie George is wonderful in that pivot as well. That's when this English offense can look silky and really good, and probably win contacts and give Marcus Smith an armchair ride.
Well, winning contacts is always key for their offense as well. But some of the things, the foibles that you're noticing in that Italy game, when they do get stuttery, sometimes it's not minding yourself through the contact. Sometimes it's the first man there not being accurate enough on the clean out, and sometimes it's the halfback being a bit slow to clear the ball. But they were definitely dealing with a bit more messy ball than prime Eddie Jones England have to do. And when they do establish that motoring rhythm, it's with very like a nice tempo to even carry to clean out, and it's just very accurate, and they can go again. But Wales will be primed to spoil that, to slow them down. It'll be on partly all of the forwards to be accurate in their clean out, and even the backs who have to be there 1 to 23, but also the halfback has to focus on clearing that ruck zone as quick as they can.
A few times in the last couple of weeks they've had carries from like a Dombrandt or somebody with like a pod of 2 and just Slade on his hole, and so they might have to be a little more tidy in that area.
There's a little bit of that. That's where you can see the kind of youngness or the inexperience of this particular England team in what Eddie Jones is saying as his third one and whatever, and you can kind of see that in those sequences where they actually get a bit of momentum, they break a tackle or something, and then they've broken the defensive line, but sometimes they've kind of discombobulated their own offense a little bit, and you can see that the guy who's there to hit the ruck is either a 10 or someone who's shouldn't be there but is, and you have to be able to go again. But you're right,
it's a little on Smith as well as kind of a new young 10 particularly, to get to establish the rhythms he likes and the relationships he likes, and be able to sort of give clear instruction to these guys and make sure that he knows as well that everyone's where they should be on on any given play. That's sort of a learning role for him, but I think I'd be very confident that he's coming on leaps and bounds, and I think this offense should be excited about taking on the Welsh defence based on what Ireland did. Like that's the model.
That's the model.
Just get
look
on top
at week
of them.
one and be like, okay, we can do that, because they are trying to play some ball, and you can see that in their forwards and their keenness to offload or keep it alive if they do win the contact, and so there should be tries out there for them to take. And on the flip side, defensively, they should be excited coming off the 0 that they managed to keep out in Rome. They managed to keep that clean sheet against the Italians. Granted, the Italians, but that's a really good thing for a defence coach and for a defence to just pin to the board and go, no one crosses our line. They got caught out by Darcy Graham in week 1 a bit, but he's in stellar form. But they need to be excited about defending these Welsh, because Scotland kind of gobbled them up for large periods, and they'll want to do the same. It could be a very low scoring affair if both teams kind of defences end up on top, but England should fancy kind of putting that white blanket across the field and fancy themselves in the contact.
And it was very, they were sloppy with the ball last time against Italy, and I know Italy are Italy, but it was very impressive the way they dealt with everything. Like, they were alive to everything. Like, Wales tried a little trick line, or Italy tried a little trick line out play, got the ball back to the hooker, and then there was Jamie George bundled into touch. That's another play gone Italy. And then we'll hear knock it on, and they'll have to go again.
A great track across to stop that very close attempt from the Italians. They're hungry on the defence, and they will need to be again, because Wales were a little stuttery on the offence, and they've been chopping and changing personnel, and it's not quite the same challenge as the Wales they faced last year, where I think it was like 42 they conceded the last year in the Principality. They'll be very determined to get that number down, and I think they'll succeed this time around. I expect probably a lower scoring game, and in England will be looking to keep it that way, but be the team that can get on top in those key moments, strike with those key moments, trust Marcus Smith to find the right pass.
I think England, just pivot on to how we think the game will go. I think England will. Oh, sorry, we're just starting to talk about Wales.
That's right.
But I just think to wrap up England, then I guess I think that they're in a great position to win this game, dependent on one guy, and that's Freddie Stewart.
Can he deal with that onslaught that's going to come?
The last time he faced something like that was against South Africa, and he was awesome. He burst onto the world stage. He outplayed Willie LaRue and lots of those Boks. Just consistently
scored a great, powerful try in that game as well.
He loved that game. He loved he was so involved. Like, he was dealing with every high ball. He had this the height advantage, the skill advantage, and he just ate it up. And that was him coming alive. But to be fair, like, he hasn't kicked on this year. He did struggle
against Scotland with that exact aerial onslaught a bit more, and it's just it's different games, any given Sunday kind of mentality. But a lot will pivot on how they can diffuse that. If they can diffuse it through him and then counter off him, they'll be more proactive in how they get their offense going. But that's England's model for sure. But from Wales's point of view, they Pivac's troops, they do have a little bit of momentum that they've managed to arrest now with that very kind of clutch win against Scotland by the end. They managed to dig it out, and they can ride that into this. They've had a gap week now. They've kind of had a couple of weeks to just bed stuff in. We've had some news on the squad. I know Louis Rees-Sammet has been dropped for the first time since his kind of arrival on the scene in a Welsh jersey, and hey, like, it's unfortunate for him, but to be honest, it's pretty much a form shout. He has not really kicked on. He hasn't looked quite his dangerous self, if I'm honest, since the Lions tour.
He had that wonder try against Fiji.
He did. He's still dangerous in moments, but I don't think he's been quite the same force. And to be fair to Cuthbert, who's revitalised now, he came in and he put it in a solid showing as well last time, and McNichol's been good. They do have a load of options out there.
The rumour is Cuthbert. I wouldn't hate to see McNichol in there. I don't like. Some Welsh people go sour on McNichol. I can't help but wonder if it's just because he's not Welsh born. Like, if he was Welsh born, people would be raving about him.
I've always loved McNichol, and to be honest, he's very annoying. Habit of scoring against Leinster every time he kicks out for Scarlets against them. So he's been on our radar.
There's a lot of teams with that story in McNichol. The man scores tries pretty consistently. So I wouldn't hate to see him involved or even starting. There's other news. Big news is the return of one Taulupi Faletau.
Yes, back into the fold for Big Toby.
Suspicion is that he's straight back in as well.
Could be. He could be for this one. He's kind of their big match player. Hopefully these guys can arrive to the pitch. Obviously, like, England will be testing all of these guys who are fresh back from an absence from Test rugby, but hopefully they can hit the ground running. But it's good to see some reinforcements coming in,
and himself and Ross Moriarty and Tane Basham with maybe Jack Morgan, on the bench.
Decent options.
That's like a much better back row than they rocked into week one with.
Yeah,
it's all very dynamic and all very good. They obviously have options in the second row as well. Adam Beard is going to be in. I wouldn't mind seeing someone like Seb Davies come in. I haven't loved Will Rowlands, but I guess he's got the heft, so they might be sticking with him. But they've actually their secret weapons as well in the two props. They've been excellent,
really good
especially
so far.
Thomas Francis. He looks really, really good.
Yeah, he's kind of come into a purple patch in his career. He looks like he's playing the best rugby of his life out there at the minute, which is great to see. From a Welsh point of view, those guys will be tested as well. You're going to Twickenham, you know that the coalface is probably where the winning and losing of it will come down to, and they're obviously without some talisman themselves, so it'll be important that young blood going well.
It went unnoticed because of how the game went, but they caused Ireland some problems at scrum time.
They did.
They're
scrummaging well.
They won't be afraid of anybody. So as far as the game itself, I mean, the bigger Liam Williams axis that won them the game last week will be a place they go. I mean, we talked about in the England preview the kicking stats. That will very much be the MO.
Say that'll be the MO again. Keep it in field. Don't give these boys lineouts at all, and let's
get after Stewart. Get after to see if we can get the young man rocking. See if we can get him dropping balls.
This is it. Kick proactively. Kick intelligently as well. They normally do when they're on their blow. That pair, but obviously loose ones could be punished as well. But it's going to be a big test for that kind of axis and the new look back line with kind of new leaders in Tompkins has been more physical this year. He's been talking about his physicality on defence. That could be tested if he's looking at a Tuilagi rocking up opposite him or something, like
Watkin was good last week, but given how good Jay Davis was when he came off the bench, I think you got to start him veteran on veteran.
This is true, but they've got some really good options now in that backline. You were highlighting it before that, like, even with injuries and stuff, you look at all of their backline options in the squad and you can pick really good ones with it, so they should be looking to be proactive. Obviously their offense hasn't really hit the same heights.
They need to find their offense. It's all well and good kicking from the middle of the field, but to be honest, like, if they can't launch off their own set pieces, they're not in this game.
Exactly,
and they need to be able to find tries. And that was what they were so good at last year. But they were just creative. I mean, I was looking at the game they had last year against England. They scored 4 tries, and if you look back on them, the first one was obviously that controversial quick tap crossfield kick, which was great and terrible at the same time. And then they had another one which was just a little attacking grubber inside in the multi-phase. The English defence shot up and they grubbered it in behind, and then like a fluky bounce and a maybe knock on. Louis Rees-Howard flicks it past the bull rushing Daly, who's come up from fullback, and all of a sudden Liam Williams runs in and scores. And then they had a Thomas Williams quick tap try, quick tap and go again, and then they had a pick that became a 5 metre scrum that became a flash it left, and no, it was a 2-phase powerful score to end the game. But it was that kind of little hungry creative moments and just turning glimpses of opportunities into tries and catching the English when they're kind of breathing and hands on hips going, that scrum didn't go our way.
That's what be quick speed of thought and speed of action has been so pivotal for them, and that means big job on the nine's hands. He needs to recognise those moments and tap and go and attack. And likewise, the outside halves in Jan Bigger and Liam Williams to guide them around, very important.
They were saying as well.
The pack, I'm just highlighting Beard from an England point of view. They need to target him. From a Wales point of view, he needs to lead that set piece because they do like launching off line out. And you're right in saying those offensive sets are what set them apart last year, and they need to find them again in Twickenham if they're going to have success here. So secure on your own ball, brave on your own ball. I'd like to see Beard in the wide channels again in that pivot point that he's so effective in the multi-phase, but they gotta kind of be proactive and be excited to when they get a chance to attack these boys, go after them with everything they have.
Yeah, no question. They were saying as well that Kieran Hardy and Gareth Anscombe are to come in as replacement halfbacks and replace the incumbents
based on decent form, to be fair.
Hardy in particular can inject something.
He can. He's already grabbed cheap tries with taps and goes as well.
Exactly.
They all are of a mould, that Welsh scrummy kind of just the way they are is very quick, speed of thought and action, sometimes too quick for their own forwards or too quick for what they recognise, but the benefits far outweigh the drawbacks. In tight games like this, they can be the difference. And going back to that 2015 game that they did win, sure, it was a pivotal scrummy to scrummy, one scrummy on the wing, one scrummy infield, and a little cheeky kick that no one else saw, but a really intelligent one. Like, those are the moments that Wales sides can just snatch a victory from the jaws of defeat away in Twickenham and leave English hearts broken.
Regardless of how it's going in the middle third of the game, just stay in it and then catch them.
Yeah, don't get blown. They got blown away in Dublin, and that'll be the fear. It's an away game against a powerful team, and if they don't arrive to the pitch and don't control things, they can see how easily a team like that can take it away from them and put it beyond the reach of one play or a flip of the coin, which is where they want it. They want it in the balance and in the melting pot when it gets into deep waters, because they do, despite being missing a few talisman, your Alan Wynne-Jones, obviously they actually do have pretty good experience in pretty pivotal points for those kinds of games. You're looking at Dan Biggar, look at the amount of caps versus Marcus Smith. You're going to fancy your chances of edging a tight one when it gets into those closing stages. So it's up to everyone to make that happen.
Yeah, and no question. And I think you touched on it there, but it was like we were saying with England, that when they were getting their powerful runners going, it'll be tough for Wales to stop it. And as much as they need to get their offense going to be in the game, and they can have chances against England's young midfield and new midfield, the defense is where the bread and butter of this team is. And they were great last week against Scotland. They were bad against Ireland, and they're going to be facing a similar kind of challenge away from home. It'll be
closer to the challenge they faced against Ireland for sure, in terms of the intensity, and just it's a home crowd baying for you, and every bit of momentum that's gained by the home side or by your opponents is going to be greeted by a roar, so you're going to have to get back up and stop them. One positive contact in every 2 or 3 can be enough to unscupper.
That's what happened against Scotland, and by the end Scotland were dropping balls and fumbling them, but they kept their width really well against Scotland, and they forced Scotland to take the inside. Scotland love going wide. England is similar at the moment. They want to go wide. Now they're complicated a little bit by the presence of Tuolangi, and that does change things, but England still, they've been putting pods out wide, they've been going pods of 3 on the edge. Wales will need to keep their shape and kind of force Marcus Smith in and force him to pop little inside balls that aren't there, and then on those inside balls get after the ball, slow the ruck up, be your wily selves, attack the pill, because England, especially on the inside, aren't overly resourcing the rucks because their players aren't there. And then obviously the job of Tuolangi, I'm not sure who they're going to give it to. I'm not sure if it's going to change their shape a little bit.
I don't know.
But somebody needs to get after him when they're lined up, and it probably doesn't need to be Thomas Williams.
Well, someone needs to put in a big righteous shot on him, because as much as guys like Faletau are back in and they're going to have to make loads of tackles and they're going to have to arrive to the pitch, and it's test rugby, he's been out of the game for a wee while, how's he going to respond? But Tuolangi likewise, we remember him as a domineering force, but just make sure that that's still him if he does arrive out there, even if he's to rock up after 60 minutes or something. First man to hit him needs to put in a shoulder and make him feel it and say welcome back to test footy, because you can get an edge in with positive proactive defensive plays and get your own crowd involved that way. And it'll go a long way to upsetting the rhythm of England. What they are experts at, as much as keeping it in and denying them lineouts, is just stymieing their rhythm such that it becomes a bit of a scrap. They're very good at that. Now, it did, last year it didn't matter because they were grabbing tries. It was a high scoring game a bit more, but they still, when England had the ball, which they did for large periods, were great at just making that breakdown, or making the tackle a little longer, or making the ball a little scruffy for the halfback, or getting a hand on the halfback as he's releasing it, and just making everything that little fraction of a second slower. And England sometimes struggle to respond to that. Their shape doesn't quite allow for them to kind of adjust on the fly with that tempo, and then you can swallow them up. And you even saw that with Marcus Smith there in week 1, when things were coming a little unsettled. Those sets just broke down fairly quickly, and you ended up having to kick it, and that's exactly what Wales want to set up, is a game where they're frustrated and kicking it to them, because they'll feel they can edge that one.
I don't disagree. It'll be a fascinating encounter, and most people are going for England. How are you going?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning that way as well. I like Wales a lot. I think they do have a chance to make this as tight as it can be, and I definitely can see them winning it, to be honest, as well. But the one that's prevailing in my head is just England being a little bit further in their development this year and being at home in Twickenham. I don't know if Wales have done enough, despite a very good win against Scotland, done enough to get me confident that they can go to Twickenham and get over that. Because it's been a long while still. Eddie Jones is unbowed in Twickenham against them, and he'll be determined to keep that the same. I think it'll be a one-score game, but at around the 2017 type mark this time. I don't think we're getting 42 this time. I'd be surprised.
2017 of the tournament. Well, of course you're going to go for England here, because we all know you're going to go for Ireland in 2 weeks' time, and you can't give them 2 home defeats.
Pretty much accurate. Yes. So in my dream head, when Ireland win Grand Slams all the time.
I'm probably with you. I like Wales. I think they have a much better team out. I think if they can get Faletau going and their kicking game going, like you say, they're a chance. but I'm just not sure that they can defensively deal with what England are going to be bringing with Tuolangi back in. I think they'll soften them up on the inside and then find the outside and find tries. And I think their defence is sneaky really good.
Yeah.
Like, not much was put into the fact that they shut out Italy, but the amount of offensive sets they gave, I put quite a bit into it, especially given the game against Scotland.
It was a question mark. It's new combinations, and how are they going to defend is always a question, but very well so far is the answer.
Sneaky good defence. So I think
and
England
Wales
match up
struggled
better
a little against Scotland as well. So
they did,
just in terms of breaking them down, ended up having to go for the drop goal because it didn't look like a try was forthcoming. So it hasn't been the same story from Wales this year in terms of their clinical offence bailing them out. It's kind of come a little unstuck, and they haven't quite been on rhythm. And I think I'm just giving the edge to the home team. I think they're very evenly matched, though. It's a very good game because neither side is fully at their developmental peak. And they're not aiming to be either. It's kind of in that mid-cycle mode. But this is always a scrappy one. And to the victor go the spoils.
Absolutely.
We reckon England. Who do you got? Let us know in the comments down below.
Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in to the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed what you hear, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below as well. We enjoy hearing your opinions too. Thank you.